Well, U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow announced in recent days that she will not seek re-election. So, what does that mean now for what will be an open seat in 2 years from now? Well, joining us to talk more about that, Adam Ollier and Sherry Gay DeNogo, both of whom have served in the state legislature, both of who have also run for U.S. Congress as well, and they both join us now to give us their take. So, Sherry, let's start with you. Your thoughts about Senator Stabenow over her course of many years of service.
Well, I mean, I just have to applaud the senator and her leadership, the work that she's done while serving in the Senate. I had just saw her the night before at our new appropriations chair, Senator Sarah Anthony's swearing in ceremony in Lansing. And so she looked great, looked revitalized. And so it was quite surprising. She spoke to making sure she opens up the path for youth, an opportunity to do that. But I have to say that she looked extremely youthful at Senator Sarah Anthony's event there in Lansing. And so it was a little shocker to hear the next day the announcement. During redistricting, this has been an issue that certainly that we're facing. I have to applaud our new Democratic leadership, especially Representative Joe Tate, who has now been affirmed as Speaker of the House in Lansing, and us having the gavel to do some good work, and a number of great folks that have leadership opportunities. But redistricting certainly is taking its toll. We know that the first announcement by Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, which opened up a seat in the state of Michigan. And the last seat, I guess, is African-American representation on the Democratic side. Now we have Congressman John James, who was on the Republican side. But certainly not having African-American representation in the African-American community on the Democratic side is something that's challenging. There's going to be a lot of money for a race like this. And so I have not seen a real short list with any African-American presence. A lot of money to raise in order to compete in a race of that magnitude. So
there will be a lot of
challenging for me in that regard.
And there will be a lot of money spent in this race, of course, and we'll get to that and the whole redistricting aspect. But I want to get to Adam. First, your take on the service of Debbie Stabenow and your thoughts about when you first heard this decision of hers and what this means.
I had just seen her at the inauguration for Governor Whitmer, and I know everyone's talking about how young she looks, but she's always seemed so excited about doing the work and has been very committed to doing the work. I've gotten a chance to work with her on a variety of issues, most notably with her role as the chair of the Agriculture Committee with SNAP Ed benefits and SNAP benefits. It's been a really important part of this state. She was also one of the very early members talking about the removal of the Lewis Cass statue from the Capitol. And so I was really excited about being able to get that across the finish line and excited about the opportunity to send someone different. There's also a portrait of Lewis Cass in, the state capitol, and was recommending and suggesting that maybe Senator Stabenow would be a great alternative as another person to be up. As we look out into the Capitol, we look out in all these spaces, I think it's important that we honor and recognize people while they're still here, which is why it was so unique that Senator Stabenow decided to step away when she did, because she's always been a advocate and a believer in making a way for other people to move up. And so I'm really grateful that she is announced her intent early so that it created an open field instead of waiting late and causing some degree of chaos. And so I think that that's going to give the state of Michigan enough time to pick the right person to replace her. And certainly there are a number, I think, of highly qualified Black candidates who should be considered, particularly, Garland Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor. You see Joe Tate, the first Speaker of the House, and I'm sure there are tons of other people who may not have come from a political background, but are able to do that. Senator Warnock has shown that you don't have to be elected to go to the U.S. Senate.
We have Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who talked during the Detroit Policy Conference this week that he's mulling that decision in 2 years that he may run for the seat. What's your take on Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist? Sherry?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist would be an excellent choice. He has stature, he has presence. I mean, he's ran, a citywide race. He's been on the gubernatorial ticket. He's worked very hard and helping to make sure that he held down the Senate when we didn't have the majority. So, I mean, he has the policy experience. He has the ability, certainly, to represent a very diverse constituency. And certainly, we've only had 11 African-American senators, U.S. senators to date. And I think that Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist could help crack that ceiling here locally. When you think back on the amount of money that President Obama, $60 million race, that's a big ticket. So what will it take in 2024 for the next candidate to win that seat? I think having the popularity and the experience, I think Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist would be an excellent choice.
I would assume that you both would agree that the next person who comes after Debbie Stabenow should be Black. To that point, Adam, you ran for a congressional seat before. You lost that race, but what also happened in this redistricting of congressional seats is that you had a lot of Black candidates who jumped into the 13th congressional district race, and a lot of money was poured into that race. A consensus came around you as being that person who should be the leader to take on, heavily endorsed to take on that seat. Ultimately, you didn't get that seat. So as we look ahead to this seat being open after Debbie Stabenow leaves, is a Adam Ollier candidacy? Could we possibly hear something from you to take on that race?
Now you sound like my mom. And I joke because, everybody's mom thinks that they're the next President Obama. But it's unlikely that that's a good fit for me right now. I'm really happy with my role at the Veterans Affairs Agency. But as you were talking about this space, I mean, if somebody's willing to invest in making those kind of things happen, I think everybody's got to consider that. But just like Sherry was talking about, Garland is by far in the pole position. And if we learned anything from the 13th race, is that Black voters deserve to have the opportunity to send someone to the space. I think we're going to be the deciding factor in a Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate. And Garland is by far the most qualified and capable candidate at this point. And so if Garland is running, I know that that's what we should be doing. We should be rallying around to make sure that we have an opportunity to change these numbers. And so
that's if he runs, right? So if he runs, or if he doesn't run, this time around, lessons learned, even for other candidates, should other Black candidates rally behind a consensus Black candidate, or should voters have options to choose between a number of Black candidates?
I think our goal should be to elect a Black senator from the state of Michigan if we can do so. And the best opportunity we have to do that is to rally around the strongest candidate that we can get. The difference this time in this race is there are 2 years to do that. And there's ample opportunity for the strongest candidate to show up and do the work necessary to get there. As Sherry mentioned, running for the U.S. Senate is very different than running for anything else. You've got to raise the money. You've got to get out across all the states. We have 83 counties in the state of Michigan. Whoever is going to be able to win this race is going to have to be able to go out and compete in every single one of them. And that's going to make the difference. You saw Governor Wes Moore, who just got inaugurated. He launched a long shot campaign down there. And he often quotes saying, he was out in counties where people didn't expect to see a Black man, an Army vet. They didn't expect to see him out campaigning doing that. And over 2 years, you have the opportunity to do that. When you look back to 2020, no one would have expected Pete Buttigieg to pop on the scene the way he did, but he had a message that was compelling, that was able to get out, and people were supportive. And I think that Senator Stabenow has given Michigan and Michiganders the opportunity to engage with some candidates that they may not have thought about. Some folks who may be out in the woodworks, but have been doing really incredible work for a long time. And I hope we're able to get one of those candidates. I hope we're able to get the kind of field that makes sense. and that Black voters are able to rally around a candidate to ensure that we have the greatest opportunity to make a difference. I mean, it's often said that Black women are the foundation of the Democratic Party, and that's absolutely true. The next most strong demographic is Black men. And so you put both of those together, and I think we can accomplish a lot.
So after the 13th Congressional District loss race for the both of you, Sherry, I'll ask you the same question. Would a consensus candidate be the likely way to go for a Black consensus candidate, or should voters be allowed to have a choice amongst multiple Black candidates to get in the race?
So let me say this. And while Adam and I both were candidates in this race, Adam will forever be a legislative ally, almost family member. The way that I feel about members that serve in Michigan's legislature, especially those that come from the city of Detroit and African American, we have a kinship that's eternal. And no matter our differences, no matter how we view things, our perspectives, our styles, etc., I strongly believe in that kinship, as you can tell with the way that I've defended recently Justice Kyra Harris Bolden. And I let the Black Caucus know even yesterday that if any of them have any issue that is unjust and they can't say anything, feel free to forever call me, because I believe in that. That's how I was raised and how I was trained. I will say, however, that it is not missed on me that true consensusship was not really a part of that process. And I wouldn't want to use this venue or format to try and drudge up how I feel versus how Adam feels. But the numbers reflect it. I mean, I had a mere less than $400,000, maybe $300,000. And a lot of that was my money invested. But based on polling, I was in the best position if all forces were aligned. They weren't. We had a male-dominated table that tried to force a consensus when voters saw otherwise. And hopefully we don't have that type of ongoing infighting. We got to address that race again in the future. And if people want to have real conversations on how to ensure that we have African-American leadership present, we can't go to our corners and take our ball and leave the court. We got to have real dialogue about what we all bring to the table.
Sherry, to that point, Sherry, if there is a similar or another consensus candidate that forms around taking the seat of former Congresswoman Debbie Stabenow in 2 years from now, would you be one of those candidates that will run in this race?
I would not be one of those candidates that would run for U.S. Senate. I think there are others who have the ability to raise that type of funding for 2024 race that I think would have a foundation to do that. I don't think that I would be one of those candidates. However, I am not someone that you should take for granted. I'm not someone that you should be dismissive of when it comes down to making sure that we get people across the finish line. I've demonstrated over and over again, as many Black women have to this party, our willingness to help, whether it's a gubernatorial candidate, attorney general, and otherwise, to get across the finish line. And when you do that, when you put that kind of skin in the game, and then people close the door on your efforts, it can be hurtful. And so that's not just about me. I'm going to forever have my blue card, Democratic card. But I have to say to the party, we have to do a better job of taking Black women seriously and making sure that we're not dismissive when it's our time up to bat.
Final point, I'll get to Adam. And going back to what Sherry was saying, as far as taking Black women seriously in the Democratic Party, 2 years from now, again, this seat will be open. And looking back at lessons learned and moving forward, definitely, I think the consensus is within the Democratic Party that it should be someone Black. But and knowing how important this seat is and making sure that it is filled by a Black person, and not sure for the both of you, a Democrat Black candidate, how important can you stress it is for the Black community to come together and have a consensus on how we're going to move forward, so that all of these Black candidates jumping in the race aren't just canceling each other out? There are some circles who are saying, you know what, that's how we got a Cherie Tanada, because the Black vote wasn't united, if you will. Adam.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of time to figure that out. And that's the beauty of Senator Stabenow giving folks 2 years to go out and identify who is the strongest candidate. But it also gives our community the opportunity to organize and to work through what we want and how we want to be perceived and understood throughout this process. I think nationally, there was a very clear understanding of that, which is why President Biden made Kamala Harris his vice president, why he committed to his first Supreme Court pick being a Black woman. I think there's no question that people understand the role that the Black community play in elections, particularly in the state of Michigan and across the country. But it's also time for us to come together and identify a process and clear understanding about what we want, how we want those things to operate, and to understand what it takes to actually go out and win. The most important thing is for us to get a candidate who can win and who can be electable. I think Garland has shown and is certainly in the pole position from an electability standpoint. But we also have to make sure that we're doing the things to invest in our own selves, right? So turnout in the city of Detroit in our primary was 15%, which means that 85% of registered voters in the city of Detroit didn't show up and vote. If we got that number up to the statewide average around 30%, you're talking about another 75 to 100,000 voters, which is determinant in any statewide race. So what we've also got to be doing is making sure that we are compelling folks with a message to show up and be a part of the process, because they understand that things are going to change and that they are part of that.
And Cherie, do we go about the process differently than the Democratic Party did last time around for the 13th congressional district? As far as
otherwise it's insanity. I think it's important to, again, be mindful that this is a time where, for the first time in a long time, we've had a Democratic majority in the House, in the Senate, and the governor's office. That's not something to be taken lightly, even with our party, on how we engage from the ground up. That's what we have to do. We are seeing so much division often because regular, everyday precinct delegates, grassroots organizers oftentimes don't feel like their voices are heard. And so you can't superimpose the will of an elected group that think that they can make people take what they've brought to the table as consensus. We have to bring everyone together and do that in a scientific way, even making sure that those who are convening are using real data and polls and information and bringing all parties to the table. That's what the Democratic Party is supposed to be about. And when we don't do that, we miss the opportunity to truly advance consensus. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm a team player. I said before to many of the men that were convening that table, if I didn't emerge in a poll, I would certainly have did what I did before, was step aside. They didn't even do a poll. And I think that was a disservice to all of the candidates that were in the race. Have a real transparent process, and a real process that does demonstrate who would be in the best position to take us to victory for an African-American congressperson and senator.
Well, we'll have to leave it right there. So 2024, Adam Bollier, Cherie Gay-Denogo, you're not running.
Not running for Senate.
Adam?
I have no plans today.
No plans today. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back here at Michigan Chronicle.
Thank you for having me on.